All right, welcome everybody. Today I'm sitting down with Julie Ordoñez, a fundraising consultant and founder of Courage Lab. Julie, thank you so much for hanging out today.
Hi, thanks so much, Shavin, for having me.
Of course. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got here, give us a little history on your experience with fundraising.
Sure. So, I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and I've been an Angelino living in Los Angeles for 15 years now. I never thought I'd live here, and now I can't imagine living anywhere else. I fell in love with a filmmaker. We're married. He's amazing. And so that's what brought me out to Los Angeles. And I jumped right into the nonprofit world. I knew I wanted to help people. I saw a lot of poverty in my community and wanted to do something about it. So I started working in the nonprofit world at a charter high school in MacArthur Park area, which is not a great part of town, and was just exposed to the education system and kind of what happens to kids who have behavioral issues. And it was really sad. And I had to leave because it was actually a dangerous situation, and I really needed a job. I couldn't pay my rent, and a friend of mine was like, there's this entry level fundraising position at this community center in South LA. I think you'd be good at it. And I had no idea that fundraising was a full time job.
Hmm.
And so I applied. I really needed a job, and it looked like a great place to work, and they were making a difference. And I got hired. They trained me. They trained me in grant writing. They trained me in how to write, like to be a copywriter specifically to fundraise, which was amazing. And then yeah, that was 15 years ago. So since then, I worked at United Way for 4 years on the major gifts team, which was really how I kind of cut my teeth in terms of major gifts fundraising, which is what I specialize in now. And for the last 6 years, I've been running my own business. So, consulting, coaching, training. I'm a teacher. I love to teach. I love to build courage in leaders. And I see that as a really huge gap. There's just a huge leadership gap in the nonprofit world. And so
Yeah.
I created something that I wish that I had when I was a young fundraiser, trying to raise major gifts. So that's me. That's what I do
Yeah.
now. I freaking love my life. I designed it to have maximum impact and be suited to like my strengths, what I love to do. I don't really do anything that I don't want to do, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, and I work with incredible clients who are really effective. They're super smart, and they're kick ass at major gifts.
That's really cool. Well, I think your background in education has a lot of value too. You see a lot of organizations who struggle with fundraising, and I think one area that, even though uh, it's a challenge, you see a lot of fundraising in schools, whether it's at a more affluent school where you've got PTAs and you've got groups
Yep.
and you've got parents and you've got families. It's an ecosystem of fundraising. So I think you're seeing a lot of different versions of that, and then taking that into the nonprofit world, which I think is very valuable in recognizing what a nonprofit has, what are their strengths, and then how do you kind of build off of that, which we're going to get into that a little bit later, some of the ways that organizations can fundraise and some things you see working.
Hmm.
I love when you talk about Courage Lab, and even looking at kind of your background story, you talk a lot about that lack of courage in organizations. And I want to unpack that a bit because I feel like that's something we see a lot too, is an unwillingness to take risks or to stand out and look different. You see a lot of organizations saying, hey, this is how everybody else is doing it. It seems like that's what we need to do, and kind of play it safe. And I don't know if that's ingrained in the personalities of people who jump into the nonprofit world, or we feel so tied to the responsibility of the ethics of how we spend money or the campaigns we run, versus maybe a for-profit world that's a little more detached from the causality, right, and the impact work, right. But I'd be
Hmm.
curious to hear your perspective on Why is it that so many organizations lack the courage needed to kind of make impact and grow their businesses?
Yeah, it's like the question. You know, Javin, I feel like there are a lot of leaders who are really well meaning, but they don't realize that their personal level of courage is both the problem and the solution. And that, it's a tough pill to swallow. It's tough feedback. Like your character is what's holding back growth for your organization. Like some people altogether reject that idea. They're like, no, I'm good. We just need a better strategy. Our board sucks. We need better board members. We don't know enough rich people. We need to get in front of Jeff Bezos. All of these like things that are external factors. And the truth is, I've just been working with so many leaders who are able to overcome a lot of those excuses because they don't go out and get brand new donors. They upgrade a donor who's giving $250 a year to give $15,000 a year, just by stepping into bolder, more clear, and direct conversations where they were like, oh, that's nice, Julie, that you can help all of these people raise all this unrestricted revenue from one donor conversation, but we don't have donors like that, right? Our donors are the ones who they can give $2,000 and that's like their ceiling. And we're usually wrong. We usually underestimate how generous people are and their willingness to help us. We underestimate that. I was reading a book called All You Have to Do Is Ask by, what's his name? Wayne Baker. And he's talking about how they did all of these experiments, all of these tests. He works at a university and studies asking and studies getting people to help you. And all of the test subjects were asking, like, how many times do you think it would take to ask a stranger without giving a reason if they'd be willing to let you borrow their phone, their personal cell phone, and not say why? Like, how many attempts do you think it would take before someone said yes? And the average was like 8 or 9 times. And the truth was it took 2 times. A perfect stranger, right, on the street. Of course, I don't know who these people are. I don't know all the nuances and the variables. But they did all of these different studies to prove that on the whole, we deeply underestimate people's willingness to help us.
Yeah.
And that, because asking for help is a form of courage, right? And so it's like, if we are the helpers, we're the ones who are helping our community, we're the ones going the extra mile and doing something about the injustices that we see, then it can often be really difficult to ask for help. And that's a huge barrier. That so much of my work is around having an abundance mindset where you're not believing the lie that you're the most generous person you know. Right? And there is some of that, like, I mean, I know we're going to talk about board members too. And, oftentimes it's just this like cycle that we get into where board members are like, oh my gosh, Javin, you run this nonprofit. You're an angel. You work 70 hours a week and you get paid crumbs. And like, you're so amazing. And it's like, yeah, we just perpetuate this, like, I am doing the most and no one is giving as much as I give. And then we confirm that by not asking for people to step up. And donors step up when we do, right?
Yeah.
Board members step up when the leader does. And I think, if we were really honest, we would say like a lot of founders, executive directors, CEOs are expecting board members and donors to read their minds. Like, don't you know we need millions of dollars? Don't you know that we need introductions? And it's like, no. Like,
Yeah. It's a,
Healthy leaders ask for what they need and want, period. They're straight up. Like there's no mind games, there's no assumptions. And I see so many executives who are effective living in this like made up conversation in their head with all of these assumptions about what people are willing or unwilling to do. And we're just flat out wrong.
yeah, yeah. A lot of that hits close to home for me because I think not running a nonprofit, but trying to be a leader of a team. I think I have a lot of those traits, so this is pretty therapeutic for me from the get. Um, because I do have that, right? I have that idea that everybody
Yeah.
understands the needs of the business. And so you almost make that expectation that, like, well, what do I need to tell you? You know the metrics, you know where we're going, you know what you should jump into. But at
Yep.
the same time, I recognize that oftentimes they didn't have the same expectation. They didn't realize that was something that I needed them to do or that I expected them to do.
Yep.
And I poorly communicated. I remember a long time back, I had a business partner who was kind of saying like, I know you said it, but did they hear it? And what did they hear? And that was a challenge for me because I'm like, I feel
Mm.
like I asked them to be responsible and take initiative in this scenario. And you find out oftentimes like it was not clear enough, right? So very often I'm needing to simplify, come back to and say, hey, so we're clear. This is now in your hands, your responsibility. I'm expecting you to come back with a solution to this problem. That's the business side of it. I think in this scenario, it's an ability to very clearly go to people and say, we need funding. We need you to take an extra step. We need you to go a little bit further. And I think that's it's great to say that that needs to be modeled from the leadership perspective and from the top of the organization that they need to lead by example and get out there and make sure people are clear on what the organization needs.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. I think that another component of this is a lot of executives conflate and confuse management and leadership. And managing people is distinct from leading people. Management is about, hey, Javin, are you doing your job? Right? You have these are your deadlines. Are you on task? And leadership is about influence. It looks like coaching people to help them come to their own conclusions. It looks like spending time with your direct reports and getting the best out of them and understanding what makes them tick. And like you said, communicating in a way where you're being honest. You're being honest. I was talking with a team. They raise like about 11 million a year, and they have a major gifts team. And the head of the department came to me and was like, "Look, I don't really think we're getting the best out of our team. Like, if we want to go past the 11 million annual revenue mark, like we have to get better, right? We're good. We have to get great, right? We need your help to get great." One of the first questions I asked this department head was, "How honest are you, 0 to 10, with your direct reports? How honest are you?" And they said 5. And I'm like, yeah. So that's the root of the problem. Like, they don't know that they're totally disappointing you and missing the mark until they're put on a performance improvement plan.
yeah.
Like all of these pieces, these cultural this is a leadership piece, right? And that's really what I help my private clients with is both let's work on your major gift skills, let's figure out how to raise millions, and let's also build the type of culture that's going to allow you to sustain that growth and level up as human beings, as leaders. And that's what I see is really missing in the sector. And in a word, it's courage, right? It's
Yeah.
being honest, being bold, being clear, and stepping up and leading your donors and leading your team.
Yeah. I did a conversation recently with the team over at Virtuous, the CRM platform at their summit. Super fun. It was kind of around this idea of blurring lines between profit and purpose and where organizations are going. And we're typically downstream from where you sit, right? An organization has their strategy, they have pieces in place, and now they're looking at either brand or digital tools or marketing. And it's all kind of interrelated. But in this idea of what they needed to do to be healthy, I couldn't help but pause and say, like, you have to be looking at your team. I kind of was trying to break it down. I'm like, I got 3 things I can talk about, and I was uncomfortable talking about team because it's really outside of my wheelhouse. But it felt so critical to say before any of the stuff I'm going to talk about in terms of the technology and the tools and your capabilities as a brand, the people have to be healthy. They have to be the right people in the right seats, the right attitudes, the right leadership, the right management people. Like, and if it's smaller, even just one person that can lead that and, like you said, be inspiring. And when you look back over the years, there's always, when you see success, one person that is carrying that torch, one person that can lead the group and inspire that group and get them excited, because it's hard work, right? A lot of people that I've talked to on this podcast, being part of a nonprofit is a lot of work and draining, and like you touched on earlier, that's not for the money, and it's something that requires somebody constantly coming back and lifting you up and picking you up and pushing you forward. We also wrestle a lot with the idea of the difference between being nice and being kind, right? And oftentimes kindness is to go in and say the honest things, right? The food in your tooth, right? It's nice. It's not, right? You got to go in, you got to talk about it. You got to say that. Like, no
Yes.
one walk around all day with that piece of food in their face. Like, you got to deal with it. So, and that is a challenge. It's a challenge for me. Like, I'd much rather just hang out with the team and not get into like, hey, here's where our clients are maybe not happy with a part of our performance, or hey, we're still not doing things in the way that's, it could be any number of options. I'm
Totally.
rolling through all the business problems in my head. Yeah, to ignore those and to just be nice and not bring them up, it doesn't benefit anybody. And I can imagine when you start to look at this idea of growing your impact and growing how much revenue you have, it only gets exacerbated when now you're saying like, oh, I'm not going to bother that person to do more. And to go back to your point earlier, right? Like, I see value in bringing people into that story, like that, to stop thinking that you're the biggest contributor and actually invite people into the reason why you work for a nonprofit to begin with, is that you now get to be invited into a story where you're making lives better, you're saving people, you're improving parts of somebody's life in some capacity, and to engage people in that, like, they want to buy their way into that if you're
Yep.
doing it well.
Yep. Absolutely.
I also, side note, I had to ask a guy for his phone, total stranger, because I locked myself out of my car. Just one.
Ah,
He was awesome. And it was funny, I like left like, what a hero. Like, I was so, it's
you
funny where our
moved.
society's gotten, where I
Yeah.
was like, it was a brand new phone. I had been surfing, so I had like wet hands and everything. I felt really bad. The guy's like, dude, take it, do what you need. Let me use it multiple times. It was a good experience. There are good humans out there
Wow.
still. So I beat that poll by 50%,
You
100%.
did.
You are
I love
charm.
that
It was
so
just
much.
charm. I just can't do the fingers on the camera. Is that it? It was just how I acted.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
I got lucky. So I want to move into what's happening now in terms of trends, but I want to spend a little bit more time here on the team side of things, because I'm realizing getting into the tactical might be it's too fast. Like, I want to think about maybe advice we have for the team themselves, right? Like, what can either leaders or people in a fundraising department do to make sure that that culture is right? Because I don't know where people are going to be at and listening to this. So maybe it's from a top down or from a bottom up. Like, what are some of the things people can do to ensure that their team is healthy, operating the way it should? Could be books, could be whatever, but I'd love to give a little insight. They can always reach out and work with you, but any other thoughts for where they could start in making sure like the fundraising team is healthy and having good rhythms?
So I think something that is becoming increasingly more important for a lot of nonprofits that I'm working with and that I'm just seeing in the sector in general is more sustainable ways to raise money, that going back to the same people every 6 months and asking for more and increasing a fundraising goal. Hey, this is what we need, that we're doing this new campaign, we need you to step up. And it's, it's not fun, and it's not allowing us to grow in the ways in which we need to. And so I really think connecting your fundraising goals with your impact goals. So on a high level, if you're an organization that has a multi-year strategic plan, if you know, basically, let's say you're doing housing, if you know how many people you want to house over the course of the next 3 years, connecting your fundraising goals to that strategic plan and starting to raise recurring major gifts for 3-year pledges so that you can really spend a lot of time just building relationships with those people, I think is something that everyone who has a plan for impact should be doing. I think it's the future of fundraising. I think it's something that I'm seeing happening now and that more and more people are doing, that they're getting out of the hamster wheel of constantly asking and doing a better job of building relationships and reporting back the difference that people are making when they do give. I mean, yeah, and that goes hand in hand also with recurring giving campaigns and monthly donors, giving online, like digital being an even bigger share of how people give. So I just think recurring giving makes sense, especially if you have people who've been giving to you year after year after year. It stands to reason that they would want to support your strategic plan and how you plan to house people or feed people or whatever it is that you're doing. That instead we're just working so hard to raise so little.
Yeah.
And it really is about not saying no for your donors and not saying no for your board members. I see the biggest mistake I see, Javin, is people are like, they're already giving X amount and that's good enough. I need to go get the money from all these other people. Why? Like, honestly, why? I mean, if you have someone who's super passionate and bought in and a supporter for at least 3 years, let's say, why on earth would you budget their philanthropy to you? That's not your job. And this is what people do when we play these games. And it's just like, be straight up. Look, it's going to take 10 million. What are you willing to do towards that goal? And we've already secured 6.
What
Right?
do you
So
do
like
again?
working smarter in that way would be a huge thing that people could do that I just don't see enough of.
Yeah.
But it's the most sustainable way to raise money.
Yep, I think so. And I think there's 2 areas I want to go with that. First is if you're a normal business and you're not doing fundraising, it's going after your accounts that you already work with versus finding new accounts. And it's always easier to find work and sales of people who already know you, have relationships with you, right? So it's the same, right? This is an area where I feel like nonprofits need to act more like for-profit organizations. This has all been laid out, right? Like you should be putting your effort into maximizing the relationships you currently have. But my question there is how do organizations know when they've hit that limit? Like, what's that healthy boundary to where you're maybe pushing too far, or where you may know I'm going to burn a bridge by asking too much? I think what we're talking about is it's way further than you think it is. But how do we know when we've kind of exhausted that, or maybe pushed too hard on that part of the business, and that nurturing new leads and new donors is got to be a critical part of the next story. I say that because you do see a lot of organizations that kind of say, oh, we've got a graying donor base, right? So they've been doing that and they've been hammering that same list, and eventually that starts to trickle down, and if they're not constantly adding fish to that pond, there's not going to be anything to fish for, right? So I'd love to hear how you're kind of hitting the boundaries of your audience and when you need to start to reach out and get more.
So I've been raising major gifts for 15 years. I've helped teams raise over 50 million unrestricted revenue from individuals. And I have yet to hear about or experience someone being offended because I thought they were more generous or wealthier than they actually are.
Wow.
And if I come to you and my approach is, hey, Javin, I want you to give $300,000 over the course of 3 years, and here are the reasons why, and their character traits, and they're things that you've said in conversation with me, And I've heard you. I've heard you say that our nonprofit is your top priority, that this mission is so important to you, that it's personal, that generosity is a core value. If I actually know that donor, then why would I back down and say, "Hey, we have really bold goals. You're a bold business owner. So I'm coming to you with a bold ask."
Mm-hmm.
And if I've done the work to build the relationship, then it's the executive's job to advocate for what your organization needs. Period. And I don't see enough people doing that. I think that we're so afraid that our relationships are super fragile that people are going to bail if we ask for too much money. And I haven't experienced that. I think that when we see people as generous, they rise up to that.
Is there ever a time where you feel like that there's not enough donors in that space to fulfill the needs of the organization, right? To where maybe it's not offended, but the results aren't there.
Yeah, I think that so I look at strategy in two main ways, right? It's like 80% of my time is going towards getting current donors to give their best gifts. So basically, what percentage of my donor file is giving their best gifts? Usually people tell me it's super low, like maybe 5%. So there's a huge opportunity there. Then 20% of my time is going towards building new donors and a new pipeline. And my favorite way to do that is referrals, is asking the current people, "Hey, who else do you know who meets this criteria?" And constantly building a new pipeline of prospects and people who would want to help us.
Yeah.
And I think that timing matters. So I could ask someone for $300,000 and that's their first gift, and that may be wrong timing. And I've had donors say to me, "Hey, Julie, like there's nothing, like I love that you're asking me for this. It's just a little too soon for me, to be honest. Like I need a bit more experience with the organization. I need to like come to an event. I need to come to another event. I'd like to get my wife to come and meet you before I can even talk about that amount." And so what happens is when I'm really honest and forthcoming with the donor, I've built that dynamic with them where now they're honest with me. They're like, "Hey, yeah, I would totally give that. Maybe after I have a bit more interaction with your team." Maybe. So now that I've asked, I'm learning what it would take. They're literally spelling it out for me, right?
Yeah.
And for some of your clients, Javin, like the customer journey, they're telling me what their customer journey needs to be for them to commit to the amount that I asked for that was too much. So I think, if we're unhappy with a lack of donors stepping up, or if we're unhappy with board members and they're just not really helpful, and to what extent do we have a hand in that?
Yeah.
To what extent are we less clear? Are we not really asking for what we need, and therefore we're missing out and we're not hitting our goals?
Yeah, which I think is where a lot of organizations come to us in that ecosystem too, although typically more on the side where, for right or wrong, they feel like they need to go find new donors, and maybe that 80-20 is reversed. At least for the work that we do, we're spending the majority of our time trying to fill that list back up for somebody like yourself or a team to work off of, right? So we're doing the other side, and I think the traditional idea is there's marketing, and the marketing is going to go after the masses, and hopefully somebody's going to rise up out of that and become part of the sales process, which is what you're talking about. And I love kind of the trend towards what people talk about around ABM marketing, which is account-based marketing, rather than just throwing paid ads in social media and blog content for SEO out into the ether and hoping that people see that and come back and find you. It is so much easier today than it was 5 years ago to work down a list of potential people that you would want to reach out to and do exactly what you're talking about. Like, we
Yep.
don't have to try to reach 100,000 people on Facebook. We can make a list of 300 people that we know their job titles, we know what they do. Even think of LinkedIn, just being able to go in and headhunt and grab a handful of people and be
Yep.
very direct with them. It is still cold, but in a way, it's kind of a blend of both, right? It's marketing meets sales. And there's some really cool technology you can use by which the personalized conversations you're having, if they so much as click on one thing, we know them. We know we can put some additional content in front of them. We can customize experiences for them. And so it's a new world I get to live in where I get to kind of automate and build technology around the types of journeys you're wanting these people to go through, right? And to be able
Yep.
to build something that you flag them in HubSpot as somebody that you want to revisit 6 months from now, and you like the following three things, we can automate a sequence. We can build that in, and if they respond or they're opening things, we flag it to you to get back in there and talk to them. It's a new world where a lot of that stuff you can do at scale, which is, I think, really exciting because it takes
Huge.
the size of teams and the level of effort, and most importantly, like the cost to raise that money drastically down, because we can use technology and a better story and better personalization to what those people need to deliver results.
I love that.
Let's see, anything else, any other things happening right now that you feel like people need to know about? I think when you're talking to organizations, um, so much changes in our world in terms of what's resonating, what's working. I could go through a litany of things that I would have been saying you should be doing 2 or 3 years ago that I would say are just not creating as much value as they were before. But like I said, I'm more in the marketing world, more in the tech world, more in the branding world, and I love the space you're in terms of things that are engaging high net worth individuals, donors, and convincing them to scale up what it is they're giving. Is there anything that is a current trend that you feel like is working that people should be trying?
Hmm. Um, I think that uh, to increase your giving in major gifts, that you're you need to be a great writer and write emails that people actually open and read. You need to know how to get meetings. You need to know how to have conversations with people so that it's leading towards a gift, but it doesn't feel gross. Um, and, if you're not a great writer, then there are a plethora of AI tools that are free that can help you to workshop how to be a better writer. But if you are a good writer, then ChatGPT isn't going to hold a candle to you. So that's the position that I'm in. I can write circles around whatever is going to be generated using an AI tool, which is why I don't really use them. But I think that if it's something that you want to get better at, I think that using AI can be a really powerful tool to get better at capturing people's attention so that you get meetings, so that you can start conversations and build relationships digitally. A lot of people, especially ultra high net worth individuals, are not going to meet with you in person. They're not available. They're on a plane. They're texting most of the time. So your ability to get to know people over text message, your willingness to do that, your ability to build relationships over email is going to be huge. And I see that as being really important. And again, it has to do with being a compelling communicator and typically getting to the point a lot quicker than what most people would prefer, what would be their preference or like their personality.
Yeah.
So being direct, clear, getting people's attention, being a great writer, those pieces are increasingly more important and are going to affect your ability to raise more or to be stuck where you are, frankly.
Yeah. Kind of feel like you need to be agile, right? Like the way the things. I think a lot about my background in film. Sorry, not my personal background in film. My background in working with organizations that were doing documentaries and stuff like Invisible Children, where were making 45-minute films to show in schools. Then we were putting 30-minute documentaries online, and the what you're going to get these days is like 2 to 3 minutes of somebody's
Right.
time, right? So if you are in film and you have not evolved to make shorter content pieces, it's changed. There's still films, there's still movies out there, but there's a lot of need for shorter clips, for shorter media, for digestible, quick, easy,
Yep.
on a commute, on my phone. And I think the world of relationships with donors has changed a lot. Like you said, a lot less in person, a lot less. We've seen a lot of organizations where a lot of revenue came from galas or coming from more online sources. And so that world of technology has changed
Yep.
and you need to get there. And a huge part of that is the way you communicate, right? And so what you're saying there around how to write, how to be able to pivot and take that conversation to email, to jump on FaceTime, to do what it takes. Like, I think the term we see a lot is like growth hacking. You don't really know what it's going to be, but you need to be able to navigate like this isn't working. Like whatever we're doing right here, like I just need to call them. I just need to, whatever, whatever that is. And I feel like there's a quality there that is, one, it's challenging to find, but also tricky because it's hard to teach. It's hard, it's a soft skill that I know our organization is starting to prioritize more than the hard skills we're hiring for, right? Like so often we're interviewing for either a project manager or a designer or whatever else. And it's like, look, those skills can be taught, but what can't be taught is who they are as a person, their grit, their fortitude, their ability to navigate questions when we're asking or the tasks we're giving them. And so I think what I'm hearing is really to just have those types of personalities at the ready, like somebody who can really navigate in a way that kind of allows them to go wherever that donor is and be good at building that relationship.
Yeah, I think that adaptability is a huge sign of intelligence. I mean, if you can't adapt, then you're not going to really be able to thrive moving
Yeah.
forward. Like, I love that. And um, constantly like learning, being a student, evolving, and choosing to let go of things that you were good at, you experienced success in, and it's just not going to be that way moving forward. And that can be tough to take, but it's an opportunity to learn, and it's more fun anyway. Like
Yeah.
to try something new, to experiment, to be a scientist, to test out new ways of doing your work. That's
Yeah.
what I prefer anyway.
Yeah. I feel lucky that I have a passion for digital and for tech because it's always changing. Like a lot of people ask like why. I think that the hard part about digital creative is that it goes away, or so it doesn't have a timelessness that a lot of other art forms do, but it changes all the time. So every time you go back to the palette and back to the art form, it's
Hmm.
different each time. And now there's another tool that makes something different. Or there's a new way to do things or scale things or bring it to different places. That's kind of what makes digital fun for me is that it's always different. So if you have that personality that like bring it on, like I'm going to find a way to get through this task in a new way, in a new format, I think that's a powerful personality to have. I want to get to, okay, so we talked a little bit earlier when we were prepping for this. I like the idea of something tangible, something that a lot of organizations probably haven't done that would be easy for them to implement. And we talked a bit about the board. We talked a bit about asking them how to potentially support the organization a little bit more in terms of their giving or like you said, referring people to give. I kind of want to think through how we can help organizations run that type of campaign. So what could a campaign look like where organizations are leaning in on their board and maybe finding a way that their board could do something tangible, something immediate to help fund a project, a campaign. Like I'd love to paint like a pretty clear picture of how a campaign like that could look, and maybe organizations out there could take that and try to run with that here. Coming up on giving season, the end of year.
Hmm. Well, I have so many concrete examples. I am also a board member beyond helping people raise money. So I'm a board member of an incredible nonprofit called the Teaching Well. And if you don't know, I mean, public schools are really struggling to keep teachers. And especially since COVID, I mean, it's just a really tough environment to be in. And so the Teaching Well is retaining 8 out of the 10 teachers that go through their program and keeping them in schools and building healthier school systems for educators and students. And so in a few weeks, like before this conversation, I was talking to a caterer because I'm hosting a dinner party for friends who I know in my own network care about education. They're generous people, and I want them to meet the Teaching Well team. And it's not a fundraiser. It's really us building our network of supporters, of people who might want to get involved, who want to learn more, who are already passionate about this issue in my own network, and inviting them to this dinner. So that's a really great way that I love. It's a new business strategy, right? Like there's going to be people who come, they're going to hear about what the Teaching Well is up to and essentially raise their hands and say, hey, I love this. I'd love to help. Let me know what you need. That's going to happen, right? Because I'm picking the right people to be there. And so I love doing that. I think organizations could ask board members to host events like that. Hey, it could be as simple as get 8, 10, 12 of your friends together who you think care about our mission, who you consider to be generous people, and who might be interested in getting involved in some capacity, whatever that is. And if you get people like that in a room together, really good things are going to happen. Really helpful, positive momentum and introductions to great people. And that can be such a huge difference maker for nonprofits. So for some people, that's going to be an easy thing for them. I host stuff at my house all the time. It's a big reason why my husband and I live where we live, because we care about community so much and we love to host things. And for me, it's a no-brainer as a board member. For some, like it is, making introductions and then having your CEO go to lunch with that person and you're out of it. Like you're an opener, you don't need to be the closer, and it's all good. Like I think that leveraging your board members' unique strengths and where they have energy that they're excited about, there's some enthusiasm that could be just something connected to fundraising. It could be doing a digital campaign like, hey, I'm a runner and I run 20 miles a week and I'm going to raise money for the 100 miles that I run in the month of October, right? Like it could be as simple as that. But I think leveraging people's unique strengths and what they bring to the table, their experience, their expertise. What I see a lot of executives do is they'll say, hey, will you're really amazing. We need you to step up. Will you be the board secretary? We kind of like plug people into these roles and we have no idea if they give a shit about being board secretary. Like, we're like, we just need a board secretary. Will you do it? You're great. And it's like, no, I don't even know what that is. I don't have time for that. Like ask open-ended questions. Hey, here are the top 3 things we need, right? And the number 1 is usually financial support. And how would you like to help? And typically the board member's response is, well, I don't know. I mean, what do you need most? Maybe I could do this. What do you think about that? Oh, actually, this could be really simple for me. I do that all the time. I could go to lunch with, this person. I see them every Wednesday. It's just having open-ended conversations like that about what your real needs are, what you actually need from board members and how they can help. Because if you don't tell them, they're going to come up with ideas because they're trying to be helpful. And they're usually like well-intentioned, but totally ignorant. Like their ideas are just not that helpful. So we might as well offer a menu and say, hey, Javin, I know you. I know that you're great at digital, right? You're great at brand. You're great at marketing. Would you be willing to mentor our director of marketing and just meet with them once a month? Like that for you personally, I just made that up,
Yeah.
right? But for you personally, as a
Oh,
board
yeah.
member, that might be an easy yes for you. Like,
Yeah.
oh, totally. An hour a month and that would be really helpful for you. Yes, like this would be amazing for us. Oh, fantastic. Like what is it that you see in your board members and how could it meet a need that you actually need? And doing that kind of like matchmaking, like I see you, I see your strengths, and I
Yeah.
also am really connected to what our business needs. Um, and then
Yeah.
make it super simple and easy for your board members to step up and actually help you, and they'll do it.
Yeah. I love that. I love how our minds operate too, because I love how unique you can make that for everybody to where you have to kind of look at a one-to-one level and really recognize like where's somebody at and how can they support. And then my mind goes like, how do I replicate that? How do I make that something that anybody and everybody can do? Right? Whether it's like the agency process of like I need something that any organization could step in and do something like this, or on the product side, right? Like how do we deliver an ecosystem, a framework, a campaign template, like something that makes it just rip and replace, like grab it and go and do something,
Mm,
right? And I think oftentimes the answer is you can't. Like this is if this is going into this direction of it being a relationship, like the technology that I build can't build those relationships. It can empower a fundraising page, it can empower a framework that you work off of, but it can't replace the relationships that you're building that are give and take and know each other and communicate back and forth. I think that's the beautiful human centric part of this, and being able to see what really drives somebody is an innate kind of relational part of
yep.
things, right? And there's only so much, whether it's our technology or others, or the services we do, there's a lot of hope that you come to an agency or you come to a software product and like you're just going to wake up the next morning and the bank account's just overflowing, right? And so I see that desire, and you want to fulfill it. And I think this is an honest moment to reflect and recognize like there's only so much those things can do. Beyond that, it's the two of you and the relationship that you have that's going to sustain, the long term giving and the willingness to support what's being done.
Yeah, I think that the digital marketing and the automations and the email sequences and those pieces are a part of the donor's experience with the organization. They build trust, it builds credibility, it positions the executive to be in a really credible, trusted, positive frame before they're coming and asking for something. And I mean, yeah, it just needs to be said, like your brand and your overall digital presence only, well, I guess it can weaken the
Yeah.
conversations, the relationships, but it can do the opposite. It can really give you such a leg up so that you're
Yeah.
starting ahead when you are building those one-to-one personal relationships. Your digital presence and your brand can do that for you. It can advance relationships. It's like pouring gasoline on fire. And I really see those working really well together and helping to build a great experience for board members and for major donors.
Yeah, I think especially for major donors, you have to realize there's a very personal side to that. I think for them, marketing really just brings them in the door and helps organizations like not filter out the rest, but really help them surface and recognize like this is somebody who has a lot of potential. And then I think that's where that ABM or that sales side of things or that relationship building, I tend to just use business terms because I feel like they're the most direct.
Hmm.
There are a lot of organizations like we don't call them customers. It's like yes, and
Uh-huh.
I understand 100%, but I'm just gonna call it ABM and sales and marketing and a purchase and a funnel because it's the most direct way to say this is what we're asking them to go through, right? And so I think at best it helps you recognize this short list that you then need to go the extra mile with and take them out of those
Yep.
responses, take them out of the sequences and go, this is now moving to somebody else's job, and their job is to build relationships. And I think that kind of setting the baseline, warming them up, and then handing them into that relationship building team, or employee or CEO or whatever it ends up being, right? Small or large organization. I think that's one of the biggest benefits. And you go back to that idea that you need that list to go do what you do best, right? To nurture somebody who is $1,000 donor into $1,000 a year or to a $10,000 gift. Those people need to know who you are. You need to have their phone number. And that's where the outreach and these different tools can really help stock the pond. And then you have to go work it.
Yep. Love it.
Man, we're pushing towards an hour already. That's crazy. Anything we didn't cover? Anything you want to talk about? Otherwise, we can give people ways to find you and follow you. You got a lot of things going on. So, anything before we lay out the list of places people can follow you?
Yeah. I mean, my big thing is ask for more. Do it. Don't say no for people. That's not your responsibility.
I like that. Okay. Tell people how they can follow you, get in touch, listen more.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So, Julie Ordoñez, you can follow me there. And I have a free donor scripts cheat sheet. So, one of the top questions I get asked is, what do I say? Like, how do I say that? How do I ask for money? How do I ask a board member to step up? How do I talk to someone who is going to give way less than what I was planning on asking for? What do I do? And so I just wrote down like a 24-page document of all the things I've literally said that have helped me and my clients raise $50 million. So it's totally free. You can get that on LinkedIn. You can also go to my website, julieordonez.com, Ordonez. I have a great podcast, so if you love listening to podcasts, it's called the Nonprofit Courage Lab podcast, everywhere that you listen to those things. Yeah, I'd love to connect. DM me on LinkedIn and let me know that you listened to this episode.
Love it. Well, I have a lot of respect for what you're doing, a lot of respect for the organizations you're supporting. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll be working with the same clients real soon.
Thanks, Javin. Thanks so much.
All right, take care.